not have sexual relations with
And I
that woman.
realize that this is something he is
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
It is. Yes, it is. This is Backfire with Franklin Chansey and John Stanberry, and of course myself, Steve Dobile Hickson, and my chief engineer, Daniel Brantley. Good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody's smiling this morning. Everybody's got a big smile on their face, because you know why? Taxpayers got an extra day.
After the IRS collapsed their entire computer system.
Yeah. How in the world did that happen?
But by all means, let's turn our health care over to the government.
It's amazing that the computer system would fail on the biggest day of its year. I guess they hadn't got through changing oil in it yet.
And what do you want to bet anybody will be disciplined or lose their job for that failure?
Probably no one.
Nope, because it's the government.
I'm sure it's going to be Trump's fault, too, isn't it?
In some way.
Oh, my goodness. Tell me about, anybody know anything about these doctors that were here in Cleveland that got caught on the drug deal?
Well, first, I didn't know this clinic even existed, which is part of the conspiracy, I would say. But it appears that they would initially see a patient there who was on TRICARE.
What is TRICARE? That's the military?
That's
military.
insurance available to veterans.
So there's $1 billion been stolen from that.
Well,
You'd have to work at that, because my experience with TRICARE is they don't pay real good. So
well,
you
they
really
found
have to work
a
at that.
loophole in that.
Yeah.
John's right. Traditionally, for prescriptions and stuff like that, they don't pay a lot. So what they were doing is they were apparently then getting, instead of having the patients come back and be seen again, they were just falsifying that.
Yeah.
And then writing them prescriptions. And the prescriptions, though, they found another loophole in. They were sending to a compounding pharmacy because there's a higher reimbursement rate for the insurance company for compounded drugs than regular ones. And they took it a step further and established a relationship with a special compounding pharmacy out in California, and they were sending all the prescriptions there to be filled. And I don't know, it hadn't been reported yet, but I'll be surprised if there wasn't some sort of kickback involved in that. But anyway, the indictment is alleging $65 million in fraud. That's a lot of fraud.
Our government, boy, they're secure, aren't they?
Well, sounds like they're doing their job in catching these people. They're turning their attention to that.
Yeah, but their system is what enabled the fraud to take place in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay. But
That's kind of like a bank saying, well, we left the front door and the vault door standing open, but then we caught the guys after they robbed it. I will say this as someone, a healthcare professional, you're going to see more and more stuff like this as we move healthcare into more of a profit-making center and farther away from a profession, and the government has had a role to play in that. The American Dental Association used to regulate advertising pretty heavily because we didn't feel like, people don't know what constitutes a good root canal versus a crappy root canal.
Or a good drug versus a bad drug.
Right, and so the profession tried to regulate advertising because they felt like it created too much of an opportunity for the public to be taken advantage of. The government stepped in and said, you can't do that anymore. You have to allow them to advertise. You have to allow them to make all these claims. The ADA was very hard on claims. You couldn't come out and say, I'm an endodontist, someone who does root canals, unless you had been to school and had a master's degree in endodontics. Well, the government shut a lot of that down and opened up the advertising, opened up much more of a sort of a profit motive, and that's where you start to see corporate medicine, corporate dentistry, corporate pharmacy. Personally, I don't think it's going to be good for people's health care.
The world's changing. Hey, I had a good idea the other day. John, you might like this idea. Hold on. Before I give my idea, we're going to take a call. Somebody's starting early with us. Go ahead, caller. You're live.
Hey, good morning. This is Edward. I really enjoy your program.
Thank you.
I want to ask a question. I'll get away from this radio, and then a second one. But first of all, I wonder what takes them so long to catch them. If it was $65 million, why couldn't they catch them a lot sooner?
Because it's a government bureaucracy, and unfortunately, 65 million is probably a drop in the bucket for the bureaucracy of what they're actually funneling out. And I agree with you, but that's what you get as you get bigger and bigger bureaucracies. You have more and more room for fraud and abuse.
You should think about what the alternative is, and I think John would understand this better than most. Are you going to suggest that the government should, with a fine-tooth comb, look at every prescription written by a doctor or a dentist? It's a lot harder than you think to monitor day-to-day transactions like that. And I'm not saying the government did a great job by not finding this earlier, but it may be more difficult than you think.
Okay. My second, I commend the state legislature for taking away $250,000 from Memphis for their, I think, some kind of celebration, because they'd taken down a Confederate statue. And Mr. Brooks and Mr. Howe voted for that, and I'm for that. My great-grandfather, that's buried at Shumack, Georgia, which is just across the state line, going down Spring Place Road, fought in the war, and his name is David Crockett, McLian, and if you type that in on Google, his picture and everything will come up. But I am for that. They need to quit taking down all these statues. That's our history, and some people don't like it, and everything wasn't right then. Of course, everything is not correct now.
Why do you think they're taking statues down now?
Beg your pardon?
Why do you think they're starting to take statues down? What's caused this? What's wrong with our country?
Political correctness.
Well, they're just complaining. Okay, people.
Who are they?
I don't specifically know. I have not studied this, and I can't put my finger on one group by saying they. People, and I'm an 80-year-old guy, and I don't really know the answer to that question, so I wouldn't name somebody unless I really know. But it's the protesters, whoever would show up at different places. They come out and show their face and who they are and that they're against it. And you never know who's in the crowd, so it's hard to put your finger, in my opinion, on one group. Now, you gentlemen, more knowledgeable than I, may be able to do that.
Well, listen, we certainly appreciate you calling, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Thanks.
I certainly appreciate it.
All right.
Well, look, we also need to point out, I lived in Memphis right around that statue. We went to school right around that statue. It's not just a statue. It was a marker for Nathan Bedford Forrest's grave. And it's been a lightning rod for decades, and the city council in Memphis has wanted to get rid of it. My problem with these things is the rule of law. Because for decades, the reason they weren't successful in removing that statue is he's buried there. And it's considered the grave, and federal law doesn't allow you to do that. Well, now we've just decided that we'll give in to mob rule and go, well, okay, you can take the statue down. And we're getting ready to move his body because they finally bullied some distant, nephew into going, yeah, it's okay, move the body. We're getting ready to move a body out of Nashville that's been there for forever. It's ridiculous that you do this. Every country, every civilization has historical events that weren't the right thing, that didn't go the right way. And the way you prevent them in the future is you continue to remember them. When you erase them from the public square, you lose the lessons that were learned.
I agree. Any comment, Franklin?
Well, I don't agree with the comment that it's mob rule. If 65-70% of the population in a community feels one way.
Did they change federal law?
I don't know what federal law has to do with it.
You can't desecrate. You can't move a tomb. You can't move a burial. There are actually cemetery rules
there are
and laws.
state laws that govern that, and states people go through the process of moving bodies several times a year.
With family's permission. You can't do it without family's permission, Franklin. And they didn't have family's permission to move that
I'm not
statue.
sure it's the same on public lands.
Actually, those laws are we used to consider burials as sort of sacrosanct.
It wasn't his original burial site.
Well, it was.
It wasn't.
But
He
was,
got moved
right,
there.
but it was moved legally by his family. It was my point, frankly. I'm not saying I'm for leaving it. I understand the community's feelings about it, but there's law, and we've gotten to the point now where we just sort of, well, like for example, the battle going on in California right now between the governor and the mayors of towns out there. The governor, this is amazing. The governor and his attorney general are saying you have to obey state law. There's the rule of law in California, except the state law is ordering them to disobey federal law. Now explain that one to me.
I've got an idea for sanctuary cities. Y'all ready for a Hickson idea? I think we go ahead and let California just declare a sanctuary city, and I think we ought to open up all of our prisons and send the prisoners down there for them to be sanctuaried. What do you think?
They probably will go there anyway, since the crime rate is out the roof because of these very policies.
Franklin's not. He's over here looking on his computer for something. You don't like my sanctuary city idea?
I think
I
think you ought to get the petition started now.
I think we ought to do that. That'd be a great deal.
Here's one of the problems with this whole.
We might need a bigger wall.
I'll give you a good example. Amy Schumer has a new movie out about she falls and hits her head, and she wakes up and convinces herself that she's this beautiful supermodel. And so it's about looks and attitude and all, and how people treat other people and all. She gives an interview promoting the movie. Now, she's one of the big liberal activists out in Hollywood. And she says, the only thing that would make this movie better is if we had cast a woman of color in the lead role, or maybe more people with disabilities in the movie. Well, guess what, Amy, honey? You were the producer on the movie. It was your movie. You wrote it. You produced it. If you thought it was important for a woman of color to be in the role, why didn't you cast someone other than yourself in the role? The Farrelly brothers regularly hire people with disabilities in their movies. And the fact that she can make that statement and be so dense as to not even understand
what she's
saying tells you all you need to know about Hollywood and the progressive left.
Here, I've got one for you, John.
John spends a lot of time worrying about what celebrities say. I don't get it.
Because unfortunately,
I don't get it.
I'll tell you why, Franklin. Because if you do a survey right now and you ask people who's the newest appointment to the United States Supreme Court, you'll probably get a 12-15% success rate on that answer. If you ask them who Amy Schumer is, probably 90% of them will know who Amy Schumer is, unfortunately.
All right. I want to bring this out. This kind of caught my eye when I read it. Bank of America is going to stop lending makers of military-style firearms. They're going to start lending money to them.
Going to start or stop?
Stop.
Well, right now, the Federation of Teachers of America is pressuring Wells Fargo to sever all ties with any gun manufacturer, gun sales company, and the NRA. So if you're a teacher out there and you're a member of the I'm getting that wrong, but Federated Teachers of America, your union is now pushing people to pull out. Now keep in mind, gun manufacturers are legal entities. And we've talked about this before.
How can a bank stop lending money to?
Well, the bank, I guess, can do anything they want to do. But the problem with this is that this is a organized, coordinated attack on the free enterprise system.
I agree. For them to sit there and make a comment like that, that's
Apple TV, for example. Apple is it's a really good example. Apple is a pretty liberal company, but they have been under assault from the left to quit carrying NRA TV on their streaming devices. Mm-hmm. They actually put out a statement and said, while we don't agree with the NRA on several issues and their policies, we also don't believe in censorship. We believe in a free and open market, and we will not cut them off of our streaming services. Now, that's a liberal who actually understands what liberalism is and runs with it, not these semi-fascists that are running the social justice movement in our country today.
Wow, John's got a lot of labels he's using this morning.
Well, you might want to look up the roots of fascism. It was in the left, not the right.
Well, the roots of fascism aren't people getting up and expressing their opinions and putting pressure on companies. That's not the roots of fascism.
Demanding censorship is fascist. Mm-hmm. Demanding that the conversation be shut off is fascist. And that's what the social justice warriors do.
Applying economic pressure is part of exercising one's
pressure for what, Franklin?
Whatever societal goal you want to
So in other words, pressure on a bank to shut off the wheels of finance to a legal, legitimate business. That's correct. So you're supporting that. You're
Whether
supporting the mob.
I agree with it or not, it's a different
You're
question.
supporting the mob deciding who can have finance
it's the mob,
and who
it's
can't.
The fascists,
it is. You all are the mob. I mean, look what they're doing to Starbucks as we speak. Starbucks is probably one of the most liberal companies in the country. I think Business Insider applauded them for alienated Trump voters last year, that they were doing a great job and that it was going to be good for their business model. They are now being roasted by the same social justice warriors over one incident. We don't really even know right now what the roots of the incident are. And on top of that, they apparently have an anti-loitering policy that store has had a hard time with. And I understand. I think the manager screwed up. I think maybe the police, I don't know what transpired, but that's part of the point. We don't know what transpired. But yet they're now being besieged.
The left-wing media seems to understand what's going on, doesn't it?
Well, let me ask you a question. If you run a restaurant, you know how many seats you have in your floor space, and you pay your rent on that floor space, and you have to generate X amount of revenue per square foot in that restaurant. Well, if you get people who come in and sit and take up space and never buy anything, you're going to go out of business eventually. So I understand an anti-loitering policy.
Well, let me ask you this real quick. Do you think dogs ought to be allowed in restaurants?
I think seeing eye dogs should be allowed, and that's about it. And I mean, if you're I take that back. There are people who have other,
service dogs,
serious disabilities. But when this is what happens with the left. We took a good idea, and all of a sudden now, the little chihuahua in some woman's purse is her emotional support dog. And while you're eating, it sits there with its bug eyes and its drooling mouth, harping at you while you try to eat your lunch.
What's your opinion of this, Franklin?
Where is this an issue? Where have you had this problem?
Actually, the airlines are dealing with it all day.
Are starting to be dog friendly. They're putting little dog bows out and stuff now.
Okay,
I don't want to
that's a choice
your
they
dog.
make. You don't have to go there.
That's right. I'm not.
Where is this a problem? Is my question. Where have we had this problem?
It's been a policy on planes.
It's a problem that's on its way,
and it's a problem that's actually already there on planes. The airlines are having a really tough time with this.
Why are they? Yeah, they're allowed enough.
Because people come in and they say, this is my emotional support dog. To be honest, again, this is sort of government run amok. I want handicapped people to be able to park up front,
right.
But there is a rolling problem with this. A, there's too many parking spaces marked off up front, and B, one of the reasons there's too many parking spaces is because we got too many people who stub their toe and go to their doctor and get a handicap tag, and it actually takes up space from someone who seriously does need it.
So it's the doctors who are the problem.
Well, it's everybody, Franklin. It's our entitled society.
The lawyers causing the problem.
It's our entitled society.
I better read Nick on that. Anyway, do you think that if they stood out there and wrote tickets to more people that are parking illegally in those handicap places?
Well, here's the thing. I think there's too many handicapped spaces out front.
Yeah.
But I don't park in them, and it makes me mad when I see someone park in them and get out and walk perfectly healthy in. And I see young people doing it. I see big, strong men doing it, and it makes me really mad. Because even though I think there's too many, people that are really handicapped do need that ability.
When I was taking care of my mom, she's handicapped, and I'd go to a place, I needed a handicapped place, and when I'd see people parked in handicapped places and get out and come in, well,
it's the same.
And I sat there circling the building 5 times trying to find a parking place.
Well, and this is being pretty nitpicky on my part, but it's like people who have a legitimate tag, but then they're not the one going into the store. It's their daughter or their son, and he parks in the space so he can be close while he leaves mom, who actually is handicapped, in the car. You know what? If mom's not actually walking in the store, don't take that space up, because someone may actually need that.
Well, I want to change the subject here. This caught my attention too, and it's a National Rifle Association situation, so everybody kind of listen carefully. But now it seems to be like the National Rifle Association might become the National Russian Association.
This has already been proven fake news.
Anyway, that they invaded the election now. They're going to try to bring the NRA swing the election next.
That whole series of reports is by the same reporters that have reported, like, for example, the story that the Cohen, the lawyer, was in Prague, that the FBI has evidence of that. No other news source has been able to confirm that in any way, shape, or form. It's the same reporters that reported this on the NRA and the Russian connection. It's left-wing news, and it's actually, that's already been proven as a fake story.
But it's amazing how it gets out there.
Yeah, well, the real thing is when you look at tweets and retweets, you'll have something. Well, for example, Harry Reid, the majority leader of the Senate, said that Mitt Romney didn't pay any taxes. That got covered all over the country. And then after the election, he came back and literally laughed about it and said, "Oh yeah, I knew it was a lie. I knew it was untrue, but it worked. He didn't win." That was the majority leader of the United States Senate, Democrat leader of the party, actually bragging about that he purposely lied and had an effect on the election. Any ethical problems with that, Franklin?
Well, there's always an ethical problem with people lying, John.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. I was waiting for our dragnet.
I know you'll hold the president to that standard, won't you?
To what standard's that?
Criticizing him for any untruths, he might say.
Well, Franklin, I'm going to have to get into this. I was trying to avoid it, but
You were, huh?
I haven't found any untruths from our president.
None, huh?
None.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting.
If you took in comparison to anything that else has been said,
there are
he
no
is
comparisons.
absolutely-
There are no comparisons.
Well,
There's no
I'm
comparison.
sorry. I'm sorry, but I'm just.
Well, if you want to really talk about liars, though, you ought to talk about Comey, because Comey is now being called a liar by the left, by the right, and by the center. He has actually unified people in the political spectrum that he was an incompetent, lying, I'm trying to think of a decent word,
Actually,
that deserved to be fired.
Actually, the criticism that's come from the left has not been about lying. It's
Actually,
come about judgment.
Actually, no. Loretta Lynch said he lied. The former Attorney General said he lied.
What do you think about the Comey? Did you watch the Comey deal the other night?
I did not watch it.
Nobody watched it. It was one of the lowest rated interviews they had. Every other show beat it. Stormy Daniels beat it. Regular TV beat it.
I watched some of it, and it was pretty fascinating to me. I thought I was in some kind of magical land. I mean, this guy, he really, really believes in what he thinks he means, I think. When he sat there and said his 4 daughters, and maybe all 5 of his kids voted for Hillary, and his wife was a big supporter of Hillary, but, he wasn't biased at all. Now, do you believe this?
Well, actually, one of the worst things he said in the interview was that his decision to bring, and it's amazing because it actually shows a dishonesty and a lack of integrity for what he's supposed to be doing, but it also was incredibly stupid towards Hillary Clinton because it actually hurt her. But he admitted that he was using polling data to determine whether he should come out with that statement that he came out, what was it, Franklin, 13 days or 16 days before the election?
Well, that is the irony of all of this. Everything he did helped Donald Trump.
Right.
So why Trump was so upset about him is a little bit of a
Well,
mystery.
wait a minute, you didn't watch the show. Let me tell you what he said about the show. He said the reason he came out with
No, I read the quote.
because he thought that she was
going
going to
to
be
win.
elected,
But
and he didn't want this to be
But that's
a
the
problem
point.
afterwards.
His oath is to be impartial.
Look, there's two issues here. One is, do you think he used good judgment during this process?
No.
I personally don't think he did.
No.
Okay? I think criticism of that's perfectly appropriate.
Okay.
All right? I just don't think he used good judgment. Now, that being said, that's a different thing from lying.
Do you think there's a plot within the FBI and the AG's office that that they really were swinging towards the liberal side, the Hillary side, and that they obstructed justice here?
Well,
They obstructed
polling
justice.
data indicates the public is actually swinging behind the idea that the FBI has been biased toward.
I mean, it's pretty
against
obvious.
the Trump
The FBI
administration.
is still way more popular than the president.
Now
in polling.
that's not to say the men and women who work day in day out in the street level FBI, but they're talking about the
level.
the top level.
Do you think the top level that has got a problem?
I don't know why you would think that, given that they've all been put there by the president.
No, they haven't.
No.
Franklin.
Well, Chris Wray's been there by the president, isn't he?
Right, right.
Jeff Sessions is there by the
We're actually
president,
talking
isn't he?
about if you go down about
Rod Rosenstein's
if
a
you go
Republican.
down about one or two levels in the FBI. In other words, the top administrative people, not the director, not the assistant director.
If you think decisions on investigations of the President of the United States are being made 2 or 3 levels down, you're insane.
They're not, but they're being managed and run, and you can do a lot of damage as you manage and run something.
Well, do you think Comey helped or hurt?
Helped or her who?
He
clearly helped Trump.
Oh, you think he helped Trump?
There's no question about it. The polls moved dramatically after he released that last series of statements about Hillary Clinton.
And you think
in Trump's favor?
And what reason did he do that?
Because he was watching
whether he had-
polling data.
As I said,
Why did he come back?
why did who come back?
Well, first off, no, wait a minute.
Why did
This
he
is
come back?
this is actually getting lost on a national level as well. Andrew McCabe fits in here as well. Andrew McCabe found out that those emails were on Huma Abedin's husband's Wiener's laptop a month previous, and he actually suppressed that. Now, who knows what would have happened had he brought that forward when he first found it. I don't know whether Comey would have brought it out then. One of the arguments is if Comey had brought it out then, before the election, probably, because I think it took them, 10 days to end up, 2 days before the election, they said, oh, we don't think there's anything here, even though that was a whitewash because there was actually new classified emails on that laptop. But it would have happened a month earlier. And had it happened a month earlier, maybe it would have shook out in the polls. So McCabe plays a role in this, too. He suppressed it in order to help Hillary. And then when it came out right at probably the worst time.
Here's what they didn't do. They didn't come out and tell the public that there was an investigation about this Russia stuff going on at that time. You think that would have helped Hillary? I bet it would have, but they didn't do that. They didn't reveal any of the negative stuff about Trump.
They thought Hillary
you can
won this
criticize James Comey for terrible judgment if you want to, and I'll agree with you on a lot of it. But this crocodile tears stuff from Donald Trump about what a victim he is ridiculous because he's sitting in the Oval Office largely because of what the FBI did.
Let me try to agree with you a little bit. So you're saying that you think all of this helped Trump?
Oh,
correct?
I think it did.
And we know that Comey wanted Hillary to win. His whole family did, right?
Comey didn't say, I wanted
Well,
Hillary.
obviously his family did.
You know what he said?
No, he obviously did. If you'd
He
watched
said,
the show,
I thought she was going to win.
All right, so let me
and
follow
he
up.
thought she had won, and his whole family voted for her.
So what you're actually saying is high-level government Democrat people are incompetent. That's what you've just said. So, and I appreciate that, and I agree with you. They're incompetent.
What do you mean?
He
Comey's
wanted
a
Hillary to
Republican.
win, but he wasn't competent enough to even help her correctly.
Comey's a Republican.
He's not a Republican.
Yes, he's a
Franklin.
lifelong
He
Republican.
wanted Hillary to win,
Oh, look.
and he was so incompetent, like most of your people are, that he actually ended up helping the person he was
The
against.
laughable part of this whole thing is all these people you're up in arms about are Republicans.
Comey didn't vote in the last election.
Okay. He's still a lifelong Republican.
But
You know it's
Do
true.
you think
he knows it's true.
Do you think he was a Hillary supporter?
I don't know.
Absolutely. You
Absolutely.
know he was a Hillary supporter.
You know he was too.
He may
Franklin.
be. There are lots of Republicans
And he's
who
so
were
incompetent,
not
he couldn't
because
make it work.
There are lots of Republicans who were not because they liked Hillary, because they can't stand Donald Trump.
What do you think started the Russian investigation?
He did on purpose. He set it
He-
up.
he-
He leaked. Comey illegally leaked things to the New York Times and actually stated
with
he
all-
did it
with all due
because he wanted
respect,
to
the
trigger
investigation was
appointment of-
already-
He said, I wanted to make sure that we got the appointment of a special counsel. That's why I leaked it. He actually has
That's
admitted
not
that.
where the Russia investigation started.
But he wanted a special counsel appointed.
Maybe so, but that's not where it started, and you know that's true.
Where did it start?
It started with the Papadopoulos and Carter Page.
It started with the
Which
illegal
was many-
surveillance.
which was many months earlier.
It started with the illegal surveillance of the
Let me
Trump
ask you something.
campaign.
There's nothing
Has
illegal.
Carter
about that.
Page been charged with anything?
Well, I don't know.
I mean, he's never been charged with anything. He's on talk shows. He goes around. He'll answer any question that you have.
That may be because he's cooperating.
Well,
You don't know that.
you know what? I think he's pretty open about there was nothing happened. Every time I've seen him talk, he says they're all crazy.
Yeah, well.
Well, they found no collusion. They have nothing. And there's actually reports now that Mueller may be getting ready to wrap up the investigation.
Well, okay. If that happens, good for him. And good for the president.
If he'll wrap up the investigation, I think we ought to have that military parade in his honor.
Yeah. You know what though? If that happens, you know what? Well, we come back. If that happens,
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Another SOS, and you're stressing, and that's the time to check in. Check in to cash, check in. When you have a cash emergency, you check in. We understand the urgency. Check in to get your loans and more. You gotta check in with your checking to cash store. Walk in, call in, click in, go all in. Check in to cash in, check in to cash. Your one-stop money shop. Check into cash.
We're at the Train Heating and Air Conditioning Testing Facility to experience their infamous torture tests firsthand.
No, you weren't kidding. This is cold. I'm surrounded by HVAC units covered in a layer of ice and snow. I get it. It's hard to stop a train.
Ready for a heating and air unit that's been tested in the harshest environments possible? Stop thinking about the other guys and get a Train. Call Mechanical Systems today to get your home on the road to comfort. 336-5739.
Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Are the holidays stressing you out? I can help. Wrap up your gift shopping at the $5 fashion jewelry sale at U.S. Money Shops in Cleveland, Tennessee. All pieces are brand new, brand name, and just $5 each. The sale includes jewelry from White House Black Market, The Loft, Chico's, and many more. Find a pair of earrings, a bracelet, or a necklace for someone special and treat yourself as well. The sale will be at the U.S. Money Shops Warehouse, 460 South Lee Highway in Cleveland, Tennessee, December 14th through the 16th. See you there.
Sheriff Eric Watson has proven his leadership experience when it comes to your public safety. Since elected in 2014, Sheriff Watson has taught the Tennessee handgun carry class and instructed safety trainings for churches, civic organizations, and schools. Safe learning environments have been strengthened through Sheriff Watson's efforts to increase safety and security personnel in the School Resource Officer Program. Your vote will ensure that public safety remains a priority. Let's guarantee the safety of Cleveland and Bradley County by re-electing Sheriff Eric Watson on May 1st. Paid for by the candidate, Richard Watson, Treasurer.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com.
Attention, Cleveland area creditors. Are you tired of dealing with debtors that owe you money? I'm Jeff Renfro, and I've owned and operated Financial Recovery, a debt recovery specialist here in my hometown of Cleveland for 18 years. We're a licensed and bonded Tennessee collection agency working for a wide variety of creditors from commercial, manufacturing, physicians, dentists, attorneys, small business owners to individuals. Look, any kind of business dealing with billing, charge accounts, or even return checks. I know your past due accounts are not a top priority for you, but they would be to me. Let me try to make it easy for you to make a change in the way you've been handling your accounts. There's no contract and no cost to you in most cases, as our fee of only 30% can be added to the balance owed to you. So, whether you have hundreds of accounts monthly and need help with your billing and collection, or you're just an individual and somebody owes you money, let me help you. Give me a call at 400-5376 and I'll come by and see you. That's 400-5376. Financial Recovery, a licensed and bonded collection agency in Cleveland, Tennessee. 400-5376. 35 years. Think about it. March 1st, 1983. 35 years ago. That's when Economy Rentals was born. Happy birthday, Economy. Happy anniversary. Cleveland's first and now oldest rent-to-own store. And since March is their birthday and anniversary month, they're celebrating by offering you a washer and dryer combo for only $16.95 a week. That's right, $16.95 a week, as well as their flexible furniture packages to fit any budget. That's 2 rooms of furniture for only $39.95 a week. Your choice from living room, dining room, and bedroom furniture, including coffee tables, end tables, and more for only $39.95 a week. So, if you need help furnishing your place with furniture, appliances, TVs, electronics, and more, go see our friends at Economy Rentals this month and wish them a happy birthday. Serving Cleveland for 35 years. Economy Rentals. Rent to own, where we make it easy to own, is what they say. 901 Sahara Drive or 472-6105. That's 901 Sahara Drive or 472-6105. Don't forget they're closed Wednesdays and Sundays. EconomyRentals.net. EconomyRentals.net and on Facebook.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
After they had to correct the fake
I didn't
story.
see this story. So
We've got some news in the showroom right now.
No, it was just, we were talking about Barbara Bush, and on Sunday they put out a statement that she had consulted with doctors and that she was going to forego any further treatment and just do palliative pain management treatment. Fine. Well, then Monday morning, there was a CNN story that she had died. Well, CNN, within about an hour, put out and said that is a fake site made to look like CNN. She has not died. Her what is that, her granddaughter that's on that Good Morning America, I guess, said, no. I talked to her this morning. That's a fake news story. Well, then by last night, she had, in fact, died. Yeah. I just think it's a travesty that people think things like that are something you joke about and play about.
I agree.
No, it said, it was like www. Someone had actually made a site to look like CNN's site with the news story, and it got a lot of, coverage.
I don't know.
What's wrong with people that they think something like that's funny?
Well, people are weird. Our whole country's just going crazy right now. And that's the proper music for it.
Well, it's a lack of respect. And I'll say this, and I may get in trouble with a local issue. I was walking downtown, and I was walking by St. Luke's, and there were 2 or 3 people. I think they looked like they were probably from local college. I don't know. Maybe that's not fair, but that's what they looked like. And they were over climbing and mocking on the mausoleum there for the Craig Miles little girl and taking pictures. And I don't know, my daughter crawled under the tree roots when I did it. I just said, you understand that's someone's grave. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, we're just, and I said, that's a young child's grave that was tragically killed.
The whole family's in it.
And they said, well, it's no big deal. And I said, well, I'm sure you have loved ones buried somewhere. Would you like people climbing all over their tombstones and kind of laughing and giggling and taking
pictures?
And you
said that to them?
Yes.
I appreciate you doing that.
And they just, and of course, like I said, my daughter wanted to climb under the roots of that tree. But it's just, you're like, look, show some respect. Treat people decently even when you don't have to. When there's no one making you be decent, try to be decent.
Dum da dum dum. Here's a new one coming in. We got a call? Let's take a call then.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, good morning.
John's not making it up because I'm not going to name a college, but I've been having a problem up at the cemetery, too, with a bunch coming around the car mocking me, and I've had to call police on them 3 or 4 times. They want to play their Pokemon games, and I've had to run them off. But I know who they are, what college you go to, but I'm not going to name the college. But it's just disgraceful when you come to the cemetery and do this.
Well, let me say this. It doesn't have anything to do with the college, per se. It's our culture of the kids, and they don't have any respect for people.
College I'm talking about.
Well, what I mean is the college itself, doesn't encourage that or anything, but that's why they're here in town. But they just don't have any decency or respect for society.
Well, I'm not saying it's the college's fault, really,
right.
because the college can't control every student they got. But these are college kids,
right.
And but I'm just been having some problems. I think I about got it cleared now, but it's just like John said. They just.
You want me to tell you what the problem is?
Yeah.
Those kids weren't raised.
No.
They weren't raised to understand that they're not supposed to do things like that. Their whole life has been tied up on their computers.
Well, no, it's also the trophy for everything they do. They're entitled. They think they should be able to do whatever they want, and they really don't have much empathy for people around them. We're growing a culture of pretty self-absorbed people.
The me people.
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much. What do you think about changing the age to vote?
I'm sorry, what?
What do you think about changing the age to vote? That seems to be the...
I haven't heard anything about this.
Oh, Lord.
The D.C.
it's everywhere, Franklin.
D.C. City Council is discussing dropping the age to vote to 16. They have 7 out of 13 in favor on the D.C. City Council. And the main guy, the Democrat, obviously, sponsoring it, was inspired by all the marchers for this gun control march. Now, here's my question. So these kids were out marching, demanding that the government restrict their constitutional rights to own a gun because they're not responsible enough, but somehow they're responsible enough to elect the people who would then be restricting their constitutional rights. How does that make any sense whatsoever?
Well, I saw some of the Democratic speakers come up and say, "Oh, I just think it's wonderful. I was inspired with the children in Florida that went out and protested in honor of this and all the kids out of school. I think they should be allowed to vote. They could make a difference." Now then, what's going to happen next? We're going to let school out to go vote?
But the point is, they're not responsible enough to exercise their constitutional right to own a gun at 18, 19, 20, not until 21, but they're responsible enough to make the decision of who runs the free world at 16?
Well, that's what they're trying to say, and they're trying to say the Democrats are pushing this because they want more voters.
They are.
Well, I don't know why they would push that in Washington D.C. There's not any threat to a Democratic majority there.
Because
so I don't know why that would even be relevant.
The Democrats' whole mode of operation is let's empower the masses. Let's make sure we get as many people behind what we want to do. And whether they know what they're doing, my point,
I don't expect this movement to take off.
But as an attorney, you do see the irony in that. The movement claiming they're not responsible enough to own a gun until they're 21 is inspiring the idea that they're responsible enough to vote at 16. Does that make logical sense?
Probably not.
And by the way, the inspired vote, just so you know, in the key youth demographic in Florida is actually decreasing registered number of votes. So these people are looking for the blue wave. The blue wave is crashing in Florida because the number of young people, I think it's 18 to 25, registered to vote in Florida has actually decreased from 2 years ago.
Why do you think?
I don't know. The point is not why it's decreased. The point is
the number of
everybody
people
was
registered to vote
Right.
have decreased,
Yes.
or the number of people registering to vote?
the number of people registered.
Well, how
has
could that be? They're already registered. How would it fall?
What's in the demographic group? People age out of that group, and if new young people don't register in, they're not registered to vote. In other words, if you're going 18 to 25, people turn 26, they turn 27, they turn 28.
Okay. Well, we shall see about that.
What do you think about the bombing on Syria? Did we do it right or wrong?
I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. Obviously, I don't have any sympathy for Assad. On the other hand, we turn our head and look the other way as long as he's just carpet bombing his people, killing vastly more people that way. So I'm not sure that we're making any vast moral statement because we chose to do it at this point.
Well, actually,
I don't know that it changes the question, the fundamental question that we ought to be asking, which is, does the president have the authority to do that? And I'm not criticizing him when I say that, because Democrats have violated it too.
No, I mean, I will actually agree with him, except on the effectiveness of it. I think it's been extremely effective. It actually physically took out the majority of his capacity to produce and deliver chemical weapons. And here's another interesting thing.
Maybe it did, maybe it didn't.
Here's
I
another
don't know
interesting
that.
thing. Obama had his agreement with Putin, and Putin guaranteed us that they had actually removed all chemical weapons. Matter of fact, John Kerry certified that to the American public, that their great diplomacy had actually removed all chemical weapons from Syria. So the very fact that we're having to blow up their factories tells you how ineffective John Kerry was.
I think that there's a certain irony in us essentially locking those people in the country.
Well, there's a Syrian refugee.
If we're concerned about their welfare.
Here's a Syrian refugee directly that was on TV this week. I just want to tell Mr. Trump directly, I'm a Syrian refugee who survived chemical weapons attacks, who lived under 2 years of siege and bombardment by the government. I would love to, buy you a beer and just sit in front of you and tell you how bad it is in Syria. Trump proved once again yesterday that you have a big heart, at least a lot bigger than Obama, because you actually tried to do something.
Okay. And I didn't start off by criticizing the president for doing something.
No, you didn't.
I'm saying there's a lot of issues here that are not being addressed.
Well, let me bring up an issue that
we can talk about what's fair or not. We've allowed 11 refugees to come from Syria this year.
Well, first off, Saudi Arabia
We're talking about people whose lives really are.
Saudi Arabia and the surrounding countries have allowed none to come over the last 8 years.
Well, that's not. That doesn't have anything to do with our policy.
Well, actually, our party was one of the parties actually saying we shouldn't be bringing them here. We ought to be forcing these surrounding countries to take them.
There's a significant number of Democrats and Republicans, all right, who are having a debate about whether there is constitutional authority for this type of action.
Well, that's a legitimate discussion
that we ought to be talking about.
But one of the reasons it probably is constitutional is because it didn't involve troops. It was basically involving munitions that were launched remotely. And so the argument is this is a single action. It's not an act of war. That's how they get around all this. But let me bring up one thing.
But it turns out they've admitted that about 6 weeks ago there was a major involvement with some Soviet troops.
Right, Russian, and another thing about that, Russian mercenaries attacked us, and we killed every damn one of them.
I was going to say, I think the biggest thing that I think everyone's missing here is Russia threatened us.
Russia looks completely inept at this point.
Trump did it anyway, and he told Russia, they're coming.
Well, they actually, last week said they would be...
at a time when there were no troops there.
They actually said we would be blocking with our advanced missile systems. They didn't fire a single blocking missile. They didn't do anything, which tells you one of two things. They either are scared, which they probably are not, but two, it tells you that it's probably not true about their advanced systems. There's another thing on the horizon right now. Trump has laid out, and he's sort of at mixed terms right now because he would like to get us out of Syria. So he's talked about getting out. The Israelis are now in sort of a threat for threat with Iran. We actually hit some Iranian assets in Syria as well. But Iran threatened Israel last week. Now, this is how the Israelis do things. They turned around and said, fine, you do whatever you want to do. We will be striking your facilities and your soldiers. And then they released satellite photos of the facilities along with a mugshot of the Iranian commander who was at that facility. Mm-hmm. And one of the arguments is that by Trump talking about pulling out, he is basically giving Israel the go to hit the Iranians in Syria hard in the next week or two or three before we leave the region.
Sounds good to me. What about you, Franklin?
Well, that is the discussion that we ought to be having because that's really what the Syrian conflict is ultimately about. It's about the degree to which Iran has influence and access. The reason they're propping up is because they want access to water ports that are controlled by the Assad regime in Syria. It's got less to do with Assad personally than it does with their interest there. Well, the Russians are in bed with the Iranians and have been advancing the. Well, there's questions about that because when we hit them was at the time when they were largely unmanned.
Because they moved out. We did allow them to basically, Trump said, hey, we're going to hit you in the next little bit. And so we did allow them to pull out, but we still humiliated them. And the real thing to take away from this
that part of it,
is all of Franklin's comments are correct. And there's a lot of discussion going on. But here's the thing. We're actually doing something over there, and pieces on the chessboard are moving as compared to Obama, who sat there and allowed hundreds of thousands of people to be slaughtered.
I think, it's amazing to me. It doesn't matter what our president does, he's wrong in somebody's eyes all the time.
Well, I think that's largely true for virtually every president all through their terms.
Not. Yeah, Obama could have danced on a Republican's grave and they would have gone, well, isn't he a good dancer?
Agree or disagree? Call and tell us. 614-5553.
What do you think is going to happen in Iran?
Iran?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
Well, we gave them all the money. We took airplane full of cash over there, right?
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Uh-huh. And I don't think they're quite living up to that.
Untraceable cash.
Yeah. What do you think?
What do you mean they're not living up to it?
If they're not living up to it.
They're supplying all kinds. Matter of fact, they're still.
Well, that's not part of the deal. So
actually, it was part of the deal. They were not supposed to continue support of terrorist activities. That was part of the deal.
So what do you think we should do if they don't live up to the deal?
Well, I know what our intelligence community thinks, and I know what the majority of our allies think.
Tell me.
And that is we should continue in the deal.
Well, keep in mind, those are the same allies that as soon as the deal was passed, they went back into business with Iran.
It's accomplished the major goal that it had.
What goal? The director of their nuclear facilities just last week, Franklin, put out an announcement that they had actually retained the ability to enrich uranium, which they had earlier in the deal said that they let that all go.
The Israeli intelligence services have said they're complying with the deal.
The Iranian director.
The Israelis, John.
Fine, I'm telling you
if
what
anybody ought to know and ought to be more interested than anybody else, it's them. Franklin, and they now think we should continue with the deal.
The Iranian director of nuclear research said that they could start it up and in 1 week be enriching uranium. The problem is the agreement made them agree to release all of those capabilities, and they claimed, and the UN people claimed, that they had in fact given up that ability. That's not what they say.
John, that they are farther from having a bomb than they were before the deal.
They're not.
And the Israelis agree with that.
I don't care. I don't agree with the Israelis.
Well, because you have no basis for that statement.
I have plenty of basis.
I don't believe it.
I've had plenty of basis, Franklin. They're lying, cheating people who would like to wipe us and Israel off the map. I don't trust them as far as I could throw them. It's the same thing. You're saying the same thing.
The number one intelligence agency in the world with respect to Iran is the Israelis.
Franklin, I'm going to be bipartisan here. You're saying the same thing that Republican and Democratic administrations said about North Korea for years and years and years, and all through all of that, they were lying and developing their abilities the entire time, both under Bush, both under Clinton, both under
Obama. So you're
not
not optimistic about the upcoming summit, then?
No. The only thing about the upcoming summit that I might be optimistic about is there is a possibility that he is actually scared about losing control of his regime because of Trump's overtures with China. China has actually started to cut off a lot of resources that go, and they are actually the life support for North Korea. So there is a possibility that North Korea is truly worried about his ability to maintain control of his regime, and he might actually give it up. But my point is, before we had this kind of pressure on him, he was making all of the right statements and doing everything he wanted to do behind our back.
And I think probably still is.
And so is Iran.
I couldn't go this show without bringing this up. It just, something just surprised me. Go ahead and play it. Okay. That's my theme song for fake investigation now. But now we've got the Stormy deal. What do you think about Stormy on all the talk shows? Putting our president down, sitting here talking like this, carrying on the way she is. What's Stormy got to do with anything?
Nothing. I mean, I'm fine investigating Cohen, and you can see what he did or didn't do. You know, the Obama administration had to pay hundreds, I think millions of dollars in fines for doing the same thing, accepting contributions above the limits. It's not unusual. The difference is the press didn't cover that extensively. Mm-hmm. Frankly, you can look it up. He paid hundreds, I think he paid hundreds, if not millions of dollars in fines for accepting way over.
Or millions, which is it?
Well, it's more than it's much more than Trump was accused of doing.
Who paid the fines?
The Obama election people, his campaign. It accepted donations way above the limits, got sanctioned by the election commission, just like needs to happen with the Cohen deal, and that's about the end of this.
Okay.
I just can't get over it.
I'm sure you guys would be taking this position if you found out Obama had been paying hush money to mistress.
I'm glad you said that, because that's the problem, Franklin. We would have never found out because the press covered up for him. Just like the picture of him in Farrakhan that they suppressed for over 9 years. They pointedly suppressed a photograph. Now, Obama is out here actually selling, I don't know him, I'm not friends with him, because the man's a raving anti-Semite.
He went to church there for 20 years.
No, not right. This is Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam, a raving anti-Semite. And Obama, for years, said, I don't know him, have no relationship to him. The press had in their possession a photo of him at an event, arm in arm with him, laughing and smiling, and they suppressed it for over 8 years.
Dum, da, dum, dum.
So that's the problem. We didn't find out about half of what Obama did.
Sorry. It's just so ludicrous for you guys to be running everything and then complain about all these alleged crimes that your people never do anything to prosecute or investigate.
Franklin, how many
that you guys are so inept
I'll tell you
investigating all these crimes?
Let me ask you a question, Franklin.
When you have the keys to the jail.
Franklin, let me ask you a question. How many administrative staff do you employ in your law firm?
8.
All right. How much of the paperwork goes through your, percentage-wise, your actual hands, every minute detail that is filed and done, versus how much of it goes through those 8 administrative staff?
Too darn much. That's the answer.
Well, you understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is you have an administrative state in the government, and the administrative state actually controls a huge portion of what happens.
Yeah, sure.
You know, you were talking about we have the key. We have the.
You do.
We're in charge.
You do.
I haven't seen that we're in charge of anything.
How do you control the White House?
Wait a minute. Let me respond to what you said. The first thing that happened, our Attorney General had to recuse himself. Why did that have to happen?
because he had a conflict of interest.
Which was?
Huh?
What was the conflict of interest?
He was a potential witness to some of the things in the investigation.
Well, that
would be the reason.
That he could have spoken to Russia? Is that what it was?
There was that, but also being privy to some of the conversations that the president had.
Well, actually, Mueller is going to find himself in that same position. He actually is going to be a possible witness in some of the things he's investigating.
If you say so, John.
Okay.
I see no evidence.
We've talked about that in the past.
Anyway, what I guess I'm getting at, I think that the system was set up because everybody was pushing for Hillary, and then all of a sudden Hillary didn't get it, and they were caught with their pants down, and next thing you know, they started up a false Russia investigation.
The investigation started long before that, though.
Well, let me...
And furthermore, even though Sessions recused himself, who was he replaced with? A Republican. So what is your argument?
Go ahead.
All these Republicans are corrupt?
No,
Yes.
it's the administrative.
Well, okay.
Yes.
Franklin, it's the administrative state. The government's gotten too big. The administrative state has too much power.
I agree.
Actually, I was going to fall back to a whole different topic, to gun control. There was a mass casualty event in a prison. 7 people were killed in a prison. Now, you can't have stricter gun control than you have in a prison. And they managed to kill, stab, and beat 7 people to death, and I think 17 more were sent to the hospital. But somebody sent me this. The United States is 3rd in murders throughout the world. If you remove Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, and New Orleans, the United States is then 189th out of 193 countries in the entire world.
Exactly what percentage of the population did you just remove, John?
By the way,
First of all
5 cities have strict gun control laws, and all 5 cities are run by Democratic administrations.
And all those cities are surrounded by communities that have lax gun control laws, number one.
And that's why they don't have crime.
Number 2, actually, your very example undercuts your argument.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does, because the answer is every other aspect of government, you would take the position that local people ought to be able to make the decisions
I'm not
for what's
saying
best
they
for
should,
them.
but
So in this
Franklin,
particular
no,
case,
you're bastardizing what I said.
No,
I didn't
what
say
it really
anything
says
other than to
what
give
it
you some
really
facts.
says is that the issues are different in major
No,
cities
what
than
it
they are
says
out
is
in
when
the
you
suburbs
disarm the
and out in the
population,
plains.
they're victims. They're cattle waiting to be picked off with a high-powered rifle. That's what it says. When you have 7 people murdered in a prison, it tells you the problem is not gun control. The problem is not the gun. The problem is people.
Okay.
Hey, Franklin just agreed.
I just what?
Agreed.
With what?
You said okay to John.
No, that was not a
You,
that was not agreement.
Anyway, that's all we got. Bye-bye. See you next week.
Those were passive aggressive responses.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hicks.